So on Tuesday, I finally got around to seeing Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. And, well, it really wasn't much of a movie. Instead, it was just a setup for a third movie. Yeah, pretty much just a setup movie. Because everything has to have a franchise. The Crimes of Grindelwald is, of course, the sequel to Fantastic Beasts, which, by the way, I enjoyed Fantastic Beasts. It may not be as good as most of the Harry Potter films, in my opinion, but I did find it enjoyable and I did like it. This one, however, is a little bit different. Of course, at the beginning of this film, Grindelwald escapes prison and starts making plans to have a bit of a mass genocide, I imagine, towards Muggles. Meanwhile, the kid Credence from the first film is somehow still alive and looking for his mother because he was adopted and his real mother might be out there and he might have some unique magical blood within him. And of course, mixed into this mess is the characters from the original film, including Newt Scamander and his team, and now they have to stop Grindelwald or figure out what the plan is, maybe find Credence, and a bunch of other different stuff. That's as much of the plot I want to get into because mainly this movie's plot is hard to talk about. It's more of a setup for a third film, and so everything is set up and there's a lot of things going on and a lot of mixing and a lot of different subplots and a lot of different things that really don't amount to anything in this movie and hopefully will have a payoff in the next film or previous films after. Ultimately, this movie, not only is it just set up, but it's also filled with big moments and plot twists. So again, it's hard to talk about the plot because all it is set up and big events and big twists, and that's about it. Now, of course, there are still plenty of good that I liked about this film. I did like the visual effects. I did like the creatures that are in this movie. Granted, it feels like it's an obligation to have crazy creatures in this movie because it's a sequel to Fantastic Beasts, and Newt Scamander is a lover of magical creatures, so it feels like it's an obligation to have the craziest, weirdest magical creatures in the film. And so they kind of feel like they're pushed into the story and not naturally put into the story as much. But at the same time, I do like seeing these crazy creatures, especially ones that I know are mythical creatures from other things and other cultures. And to see them in the Harry Potter universe was neat to see. Such as Kelpies and, what's that Japanese water demon? A Kappa. That's what I'm thinking of. So the visual effects and the creature designs are really spectacular in the movie. There's also quite a few good action sequences that I did enjoy, especially Grindelwald's escape at the very beginning of the movie. I thought all the acting was really good in the film, and there were some performances that I highly enjoyed, such as Eddie Redmayne still playing Newt Scamander, and I did really like Zoe Kravitz's performance in the movie, as well as Johnny Depp's as Grindelwald, and I do like Jude Law. I found him to be a fine actor, and it was neat seeing him as a younger Dumbledore. But again, all the acting was either completely fine or really good in this movie. There wasn't any real bad acting that I could think of, or that I felt was bad acting. Also, the film is filled with a cast of very unique and interesting characters. Now, granted, the characters, most of them are completely underdeveloped, but they're still interesting characters you want to learn about. There is a lot of darker elements in this film, which I do admire because, granted, the film is called Crimes of Grindelwald, so you'd imagine that it could be really dark and sinister, especially with our villain being a little homicidal and maybe wants to start a genocide. Also is very manipulative. I think he's a really great villain for the franchise. Still no Voldemort, but Johnny Depp plays this really great manipulative psychopath. So as you can imagine, there is darker stuff in this film, and it also makes sense given that, well, all the Harry Potter fans are older now. They sort of grew up as they watched the film and or as they read the books, and so they're ready for darker stuff. And this one is no different from all the other darker Harry Potter films, but maybe a tad bit, because there is some children deaths in this film and some deep tragic backstories and yeah, some pretty wicked stuff in the movie. So again, there are plenty of things that I enjoyed about the film, and I wasn't bored sitting through it, but there is a lot of things that I didn't like about the film. One, like I said, the characters are underdeveloped, especially all the newer characters and even some of the recurring characters in the film. There's also our main character, Newt Scamander, which I do like, and I do like Eddie Redmayne's performance. But in this movie, he's not developed all that well. He has a bit of a problem that he eventually resolves in the film where he has to choose a side and he doesn't like choosing a side. That's in the trailer and it's in the beginning of the film. And then he just ultimately chooses a side by the end, and it's, okay, that wasn't that big of a deal or that big of a character conflict. There is this backstory with Zoe Kravitz's character, Lestrange, and there's some crazy stuff, and it's this whole big reveal that I don't want to talk about. I love that part, but at the same time, I felt like I wish I knew a little bit more before that, maybe a little bit more of foreshadowing. Sure, there's this foreshadowing when she's younger and has to go against a boggart, and it takes the form of her fear, and that of course is a hint to her backstory, but it felt like you don't know too much about her character, and then suddenly towards the end we have this huge dump of this huge backstory and this tragic thing, and it's like, okay, now I want to know about the character, and then something happens in the conflict, and then you're like, oh, well, I guess that was pointless then? I think all the underdeveloped characters of this movie is a product to the fact that a lot of this movie is just set up for the third film. A lot of it is these plot points that don't go anywhere in this film and hopefully are resolved in the next film, and so all the characters are underdeveloped because of those things. And so ultimately it doesn't feel like you're seeing one whole story, just a snippet of an entire story. And it feels like you need to know a bunch of backstory in order to care about these characters that you just learn about in this film, and then some of them die and some of them don't lead to anything by the end, and you're just like, okay, what was the point then? So ultimately the story and the fact that it feels like a setup, and just one big setup, is what keeps it from being a pretty good movie. But again, that's just my opinion, because some people might enjoy the fact that it's just a setup and find, oh, I want to know more about it, so I'm anxious to see the third film. And that's fine if you feel that way, but I'm not a big fan of movies that are just set up, especially nowadays when we get a lot more of them, especially in blockbusters that want to start a franchise. It gets annoying, and it feels unfulfilling. Ultimately, there is enough good things about this film with the visual effects, with the acting, with the underdeveloped but interesting characters, and some moments here and there that were really fantastic. No pun intended. So ultimately, I think I'm going to give The Crimes of Grindelwald 3 stars. It's just barely enough to make it a 3. It probably should be a 2.5 or a 2, just because of the fact that it's a setup story and it's not really a full movie, but I did enjoy it, so again, 3 stars for me. So, did you see The Crimes of Grindelwald? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews and countdowns of previous years, of this year, of whatever. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.